Martin, a middle-class office worker in Nairobi, had always been cautious about his spending. He was the kind of man who double-checked his pockets before leaving anywhere. But one Friday evening after a long and tiring day, he made a mistake that would change his life forever. As he sat in a small Nyama Choma joint, enjoying his meal, he reached for his wallet, only to find it missing. Panic set in. He had used it just moments ago to pay for a soda. Had he dropped it? Had someone stolen it? The waiter stood beside him, waiting for the bill. Martin patted his pockets again, his mind racing. "Sir, is there a problem?" the waiter asked, sensing his distress. Embarrassed, Martin explained the situation. The waiter sighed and signaled the manager. The manager, a tough-looking man with a deep scar on his cheek, walked over, arms crossed. "No money, no leaving," he said flatly. Martin felt a chill. He pleaded to be allowed to call a friend to bring the money, but the manager shook his head. The mood in the small restaurant shifted. The other customers fell silent. The friendly atmosphere vanished, replaced by an eerie tension. Then from the corner of the room a deep voice spoke. "I'll cover his bill." Martin turned to see a man he had never met before, a tall figure in a dark coat, seated in the shadows. His face was partially hidden by the dim lighting, but there was something unsettling about him. "No need," Martin started, but the man had already placed some cash on the table. "Consider it a favor," the stranger said, smiling faintly. Reluctantly, Martin thanked him, finished his meal and left the restaurant. But as he walked home, he couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. Who was that man? And why had he helped him? The next morning, curiosity got the best of him. He returned to the restaurant, hoping to find the stranger and properly repay him. But when he described the man to the waiter frowned. "That's impossible," he said. "Why?" Martin asked. The waiter hesitated before speaking. "The man you're describing, he died in a car accident a year ago. Right outside this restaurant." Martin felt his blood run cold. He turned toward the door, his heart pounding. And there, at the entrance, was his wallet, sitting on the ground as if it had never been lost. Martin stood frozen at the entrance of the restaurant, staring at his wallet on the ground. His heart pounded. Was this some kind of prank? Or was there really something unnatural about what had happened last night? Slowly he bent down and picked up the wallet. It was intact, his ID cards and cash all untouched. But one thing was different. A small, folded piece of paper had been tucked inside. With trembling hands he opened it. "You owe me more than just a meal. Find me where it all ended." Martin's stomach twisted. Where it all ended? Could the note be referring to the accident the waiter had mentioned? There was only one way to find out. The next day, Martin stood outside the restaurant, near the road where the accident had happened. The street was busy, but a strange stillness hung in the air. Then a voice interrupted his thoughts. "Looking for something?" Martin turned. A newspaper vendor was watching him. "I heard there was an accident here last year," Martin said. "Do you know anything about it?" The vendor sighed. "Yeah. A man named David was hit by a speeding car late at night. He was a quiet guy, always sat in that corner seat in the restaurant. Some say he was waiting for someone that night, but no one ever came." "Waiting for someone?" Martin asked, his pulse quickening. The vendor shrugged. "That's the rumor. He looked troubled that night. Like he had something important to say to someone." Martin felt a chill crawl up his spine. Could it be him? Digging deeper, Martin searched for old news articles about the accident. He found a picture of the victim, and his heart nearly stopped. David. The same man who had paid for his meal. The same man who was supposed to be dead. But why had David helped him? What did he want? Then, another shocking discovery. David's full name was David Mutua. Martin whispered the name and it felt eerily familiar. Then it hit him. Years ago, when Martin was in university, he had been struggling financially. One night, a kind stranger had lent him money, refusing to take it back. The man's name? David Mutua. David had helped Martin once before. And now, even in death, he had done it again. But why had David wanted to meet him that night at the restaurant? Determined to find answers, Martin tracked down David's old address. An elderly woman answered the door, David's mother. "David always talked about you," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "He said helping you that night gave him hope. He wanted to meet you again, but he never got the chance." She handed Martin a worn-out notebook. "This is his diary. Maybe it will tell you why." Martin flipped through the pages until he found an entry from the night David had helped him in university. "Tonight, I met a young man named Martin. He reminded me of myself, a dreamer, struggling but determined. He was short on money, so I gave him what I had. He thanked me, said he'd pay me back one day. But I don't need his money. What I need is to believe that kindness still matters. That helping someone, even a stranger, still means something. Maybe one day when I feel lost, I'll reach out to him. And I hope he remembers me. Martin clenched the diary, his chest tightening. David had reached out. He had waited for Martin that night at the restaurant, needing a friend. But Martin had never shown up. And now David was gone. That night, Martin returned to the restaurant. He sat in the same corner seat and ordered 2 plates of food. One for himself. And one for the friend he would never forget. This was his way of repaying the debt. Not with money, but with remembrance. Moral of the story: never take kindness for granted. Sometimes people don't need money or favors, they just need someone to listen.